What's up, party people, to another episode of Who Asked You Podcast. I am your host, Stoody to Groovey, and today we have something very, very interesting and enlightening to talk about tonight. I know I was supposed to do this a little bit earlier, but some things happen, but I'm here now. Okay, so please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Numbers been going up. Topics are going to get better and better. So, yeah. Today we're going to be talking about Universe 25. Before we get into that, let me do some self promotion right here. This is my newest book, The Junk and Junk Food, a comprehensive look at corner store chemistry. You can get that book on Amazon.com today just for $19.99. The link is in the description. And as well, my new website, knowledgebynature.square.site. Log on to there if you want to learn nutritional, educational tidbits. If you want to do like a weight loss consultation, if you're trying to join a mentorship program, we have a mentorship program as well that runs for 6 months. And we also do personalized meal plans. So head over to knowledgebynature.square.site. The link is also in the description as well. So I'm going to leave that scrolling as we talk. And before we actually get into what we're going to be talking about with Universe 25, I was doing a walk, I walk every day, but I was doing a nice little walk and I was reflecting. And this morning I thought of Kanye West's song, Jesus Walks. And if we have the understanding that Jesus is the Son, then you see that as you're walking, it's as if the Son is following with you. And that's where that Jesus walks with me comes from. It's literally because the Son seems like it's following you or is, walking with you. And for those who don't know, if you actually sun gaze and your eyes get adjusted, you will notice that actually there are 4 rays of light that you'll see. Like, hold on. Let me do something real quick. Oops. Oops. Hold on. I'm see. I got this little thing I want to show y'all. Okay. So I don't know how good y'all gonna be able to see that, and you see stuff that's wrong. Okay. This is the sun, right? Hopefully y'all can see that yellow dot. When you're sun gazing, you're gonna see something along the lines of like this. I don't know if y'all can really see that because like it looks bright. But when you sun gaze, it looks like that. So I thought of this theory that I believe kind of like solidifies whether this life is a simulation or not. And it might get a little spooky, but I'm gonna show you something. Because I was just reflecting and thinking. So let's say there are 4 people walking together, right? Okay. So there are 4 people under the sun, right? So in order for, excuse me, Jesus or the Son to walk with you, that means let's say your person, there's A, B, C, and D. Person A keeps walking forward, right? Person B stays where he's at. Person C goes down. Person D walks backwards. And I'm going to show y'all. Right? Person A, oops, that's D. Sorry. Person A goes this way. Person B stays. Person C walks this way. And person D walks backwards. But whose perspective matters, because, hold on, the sun will travel, depending on whose perspective it is, the sun will go all the way. The sun will go that way. The sun will stay put. The sun will go down. And the sun will go up. So you see that? So really, it doesn't matter what perspective you have, because the sun is going to follow you. So how is that possible? And this is just my working theory. Okay. I like that. I like that. I like that, Rain, because that's kind of like where I'm going. That's where I'm kind of going with it. If y'all know anything about the slit, hold on, let me erase this. I taught this. Well, I talked about this in one of my lectures about how light splits when it's observed. Like if you shine a light in a slit, you would think that it's a direct beam, but when you look at it, it starts splitting into the rainbow. So my theory is that as the sun is getting, and I'm gonna show y'all the picture when I get done. As the sun gives off the rays, and our eyeball takes in the stimuli and projects it back out, we are literally witnessing the split of the sunlight. And hold on. Nope. Hold on. Because I said it was 4 people, so I'm gonna do 4 different. That kind of looks like the same color. Hold on. There we go. So, like I was saying, I hope y'all can see that. As the light hits our retinas and it reflects back out, as you can see, hopefully, it's kind of awkward trying to hold this up. But yeah, you see the 4 colors. Wait, 4 colors of the rainbow split, and so that way we will always be able to perceive the sun, no matter whose perspective it is. And that's just a working theory that I just thought of this morning, and I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit before we get into the universe 25. So if anybody has an opinion on that, or if y'all watch this later, go in the comments and tell me what y'all think about that theory. And I will work on how to hold up the board when I'm doing that, because I'm definitely going to be doing more of those teaching on the board and without making a big mess. But anyways, so let's go ahead and go to the big story. Universe 25. I'm going to do it I'm going to talk the most plainest way I can about it, and then I'm going to actually play the video and we're going to react to it, blah, blah, blah. But what Universe 25 is basically a social experiment that was done on mice years ago. And basically what it did was try to find out what would mice do in a utopian society, meaning where they don't have to worry about water and they don't have to worry about food. Well, to do a synopsis, there were very aggressive male mice that bullied other mice, and then other mice were born complacent and just worried about themselves. The female mice started to be aggressive towards the babies and wasn't really wanting to mate anymore and have baby mice anymore. And believe it or not, homosexuality in the rats rose. Excuse me. And then at the end of their experiment, all of the mice population died. So there was first when food and water was available, like population exploded, and then that's when all the psychological issues were started sprouting up, and then the experiment ended when all the mice died. And I'm talking about this experiment because if you look at society now, and I'll just put a blanket term on food stamps, government assistance, whatever. So, excuse me. So it's really like, and think about it this way with the stimulus package, where everybody's waiting on handouts. And so the drive to work, I mean, you see unemployment rate is sky high. Nobody really wants to work. Everybody's waiting on the government handout or for somebody else to do it, whatever. And you see men are ultra violent, women are aggressive, homosexuality is on the rise. And, I'm going to let y'all I'm just going to let y'all watch it. And I'm not saying that food stamps is the reason why men don't know how to keep their hands to themselves. I'm not saying that food stamps is why women are aggressive or that food stamps is the cause of homosexuality, because that would be asinine. There's a lot of factors, but I'm just trying to let y'all see the correlation between what this experiment showed in the mice and what we see in society today. So what I'm about to do now is share my screen and we can get into it. And yeah, for sure, without water, life cannot be sustainable at all, period. And that's why them putting chemicals in the water and like fluoride and chlorine and all that kind of stuff is very, very detrimental to our mental state, because a lot of those are like debilitative to our mind. So let me share my screen and stop talking. And here we go.
Of the strange research to come out of mid-1900s America, there is little with a legacy as enduring or as terrifying as the mouse utopia experiments. Taking place throughout the 50s, 60s, and early 70s, the grim fate of the subjects was published in the national magazine Scientific American, and the experiments themselves were largely taken as apocalyptic portents. In a post-war United States, the language used to describe the results, such as behavior sync, became synonymous with fears of an overpopulated world and violent, deviant behavior in cities. Today, they are preserved within fiction, such as Channel 4's conspiracy thriller Utopia and the classic animated movie The Secret of NIM. So what were the mouse utopia experiments? Shortly after World War II, a group known collectively as the Environmentalists were making a large push to prevent environmental degradation as well as overexploitation of the planet's renewable resources. Among these people were groups.
I want to just make a note that nothing is new under the sun, and the same things that's been happening back then is still happening today. I wanted to make that note.
specifically known as the Neo-Malthusians, a term referring to the 18th and 19th century English scholar Thomas Robert Malthus. Malthus proposed that while the world's population may increase exponentially, food production can only increase linearly, leading to an eventual subsistence-level existence for the human race that became known as a Malthusian catastrophe.
Basically, what he's saying is that we cannot realistically grow enough food for a mass populated society without them only solely depending on the actual, like, let's just say farmers or people in power.
Catastrophe. While advancements such as the Green Revolution saw that this didn't come about, the Neo-Malthusians acknowledged his concerns about overpopulation and feared that this pattern would result in the collapse of civilization or, at best, have extreme adverse effects. These fears were given a platform in writing of the time, especially in works such as William Folk's Road to Survival in 1948, and perhaps most famously, Silent Spring by Rachel Carson in 1962.
By the way, and I know I keep stopping it, but hold on. Rain says, to your point, self-sufficiency is more stressful than ever before, but the monetary system is in place to keep us. Hold on, should have got more to say. Whoops. Come on. The unnatural activity towards each other could be the result of boredom. We're going to get into that. You are right on the money. We're going to get into that. And I also want to say this notion of overpopulation clearly has been in the higher circles mindset forever. They literally see just normal people as a hindrance to the future of the planet. And I want to say this: when you hear environmentalists and so-called humanitarians talk about lowering the carbon footprint, you have to remember that the carbon that they're talking about is people. It's not they're not talking about a gas or element or anything like that. They're literally talking about carbon, people, because that's what we are made of. Carbon. That's what they're talking about. When they say reducing the carbon footprint, they are talking about reducing the population.
The movement's explosion of popularity in the 50s and 60s, however, researchers had already begun work investigating the effects of population growth, and among them was a man named John V. Calhoun. Born in 1917, Calhoun took an early interest in science, specifically ornithology, publishing his first paper on birds when he was 15, but over time his interest would change. By the time he received his PhD, his focus had turned to ethology, the study of animal behavior. When his education was concluded, he moved with his family to Towson, Maryland, to begin research at Johns Hopkins University.
Gotta stop that. Do you see how long these institutions have had their claws in society? If you don't know who at Johns Hopkins, like, they're literally responsible for this simulated, let's say, pandemic. I'll put it in that terms because I don't want my channel to get off. I'm already on the shit list. But yeah, Johns Hopkins is responsible for that simulation of the current era that we're living in. And like that can just kind of show you how deep and long these people have been in power and trying to eliminate, you know what I'm saying? Or at minimum, understand the inner workings and the behaviors, of the human population, which I ain't trying to be all, you know what I'm saying? I ain't trying to be all conspiracy, but just think about this for a second. If you're a human resource manager, that would imply that human is a thing and it's a resource and you have to manage it. And I know that that sounds simple, but think about it. If in order to signify something, you have to be something outside of it. You feel me? You feel me? Like if you gotta say I'm a human resource manager, I'm managing the resource that is a human. And what other besides animals, what other thing have you well, an animal wouldn't identify you as a human. Like, so who's identifying you as a human? When we're talking about human psychology, when we talk about human social sciences and studies and stuff, what are we doing? Like, just think about that. Just the like words are spells. Shout out to Double R to God. And words have power. And it's not just, we got to really think about the etymology and really think about the kind of stuff that we're saying. So let's continue. But John Hopkins being grimy in these streets.
Research itself would be conducted much closer to home. In 1947, shortly after he arrived, he approached his neighbor about using some of their neglected property for an experiment. The scope would be massive, and according to Calhoun, his neighbor probably didn't expect such a scale when they agreed to let him use the forested area. Taking over a quarter of an acre, Calhoun constructed a massive habitat, complete with food, water, ample shelter, and protection from predators, with the only limiting condition being the restriction to the quarter-acre living space. He affectionately provided his enclosure a name, Rat City. Unfortunately, no publicly available images of Rat City exist. Calhoun was very familiar with Norway rats, having performed research on them for his doctorate, and he estimated that Rat City could sustain approximately 5,000 individuals, though if they reached this number, the population density would be tight. He began by placing 5 pregnant females in the enclosure, providing ample genetic diversity, and soon the population.
One thing I want to say, Rat City is no different than the projects. Rat City is no different than the projects. It is an enclosed area, tightly knit, with people with low IQs. And I'm not saying that in order to be poor, you have to have a low IQ, because I'm not rich at all, period. And I'm a smart MFer. So like, I'm not equating money to intelligence, but y'all know the type of people that live in the projects, and they're actually more aggressive and hypersexual. And you know how I get in the hood. Like, shout out to the Regencies back in Flint, Michigan. Like, it ain't no secret how people get down, in the project. So it's the same thing. Some can't dwell in the right. And, a lot of melanated people have seasonal depression because of the different climate changes and stuff like that. But that's another topic for another day. But
was increasing exponentially. But then something surprising happened. Rather than the population increasing to fill the space of the enclosure, it quickly leveled off at 150 members. He also noted some behavioral peculiarities. Despite the large size of Rat City, the residents seemed to gather around just a few places, forming social groups of 12 and limiting themselves to specific feeding locations. He would conclude the experiment.
We can kind of equate that to like gangs. That we can equate that to gangs. All right. Just for the sake of this video, we can equate. I mean, it's not really a disclaimer I should use, but think of that, how gang members pick one area of the city and they dwell in that one spot, and they're very territorial about that one spot. Yeah, no, yeah, I get it. I understand.
After 2 years and 4 months, during which the population never grew over 200. Careful observation revealed the cause: high infant mortality. For some reason, as the experiment progressed and the population increased, the mothers were not caring for their young properly, leading to most of them dying before reaching maturity. Calhoun had his theories as to why this was, but to prove them, he would need more data.
Don't that sound like the hood? Get your kid out the street. Why are y'all partying and the baby's crying? Or they got dirty diapers? You feel me? Do y'all see what I'm saying? Do y'all see what I'm saying, man? Why is your boyfriend eating steak and your kids eating noodles? Like, why is your kitchen dirty but you smoking weed? Why is your clothes dirty and your kids' clothes dirty but y'all drinking alcohol? Like, so many parallels, man.
In 1954, about 5 years after his initial experiment concluded, he was hired by the National Institute of Mental Health, often shortened to NIM. Within the laboratory of psychology, Calhoun was given ample resources to continue his.
By the way, quick note, that institution is still active to this day.
Work. With a team, he began feverishly designing and constructing habitats, sometimes referred to as universes, where he performed numerous smaller-scale and more controlled versions of his original rat study on a domesticated strain of albino Norway rat. These rats would want for nothing. All physical needs for a healthy rat lifestyle would be provided for them, including food, water, climate control, and nesting material. Calhoun spent 8 years perfecting his enclosures and methods until finally, in February of 1962, an article of his writing was published in the magazine Scientific American. The article was entitled Population Density and Social Pathology. His opening paragraph ominously reads so. Quote, in the celebrated thesis of Thomas Malthus, vice and misery impose the ultimate natural limit on the growth of populations. Students of the subject have given most of their attention to misery, that is, to predation, disease, and food supply as forces that operate to adjust the size of a population to its environment. But what a vice.
I just wanted to make that clear. In the celebrated thesis of Thomas Malthus, vice and misery impose the ultimate natural limit on the growth of populations. Meaning, if you have a very dangerous setting, if you live in a dangerous setting and you have a lot of debilitating products like alcohol and crack, cocaine, heroin, blah, 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 then it stunts the natural growth of populations, which is why you see drugs flooding the city, which is why you see junk food in every store in the hood, all that kind of stuff. Students of the subject have given most of their attention to misery, that is to predation, disease, food supply, as forces that operate to adjust the size of a population to its environment. Meaning, if you make sure that the place is psychologically erosive, then you can control the population, because people will be too depressed or in survival mode to actually mate and create a culture and, build upon themselves. So with disease, predation, which, let me make sure I know, because I've heard that word before, but it's been a while, so I don't want to cap and act like I know a word when I don't, when I can definitely just Look it up. So predation means the act of robbing, victimizing, or exploiting others, the act of plundering or pillaging, robbery, predatory incursion. And do I have to say more? We were just talking about how gangs treat you. You feel me? You might get robbed. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Yeah. Like literally, we're living this universe 25. Like
setting aside the moral burden of this word, what are the effects of the social behavior of a species on population growth and of population density on social behavior? Unquote. To answer this question, he cited 6 of his experiments in particular, all with similar composition and concerningly similar results. The design of these habitats was simple. The layout was a rectangle measuring 10 feet by 14 feet, divided into 4 equal sections by electric fences. 3 of these fences sported bridges over which the rats could climb, while one fence lacked such a bridge, essentially creating one long space that wrapped in on itself. Each section was equipped similarly with a food hopper, water, and
how many excuse me, how many projects do you see that's laid out just like this? Real talk, real spill. How many? Because suburbs ain't built like that. Suburban areas are not built like that. Even, excuse me, that's even like kind of like a layout how colleges and high schools are. But for sure, this is definitely how hoods are laid out.
nesting areas accessible by spiral staircases. But Calhoun, leveraging his experience with the rats, made special changes to encourage specific behaviors. He enticed the rats to use one of the center pens by making the spiral staircase to that pen's living spaces shorter than the others, though he admits this was a comparatively small factor. But the more insidious change was to their food supply. In half of the experiments, Calhoun supplied powdered food, but in the other half, he placed feeders of his own design, consisting of hard pellets behind a wire mesh. Half of his experiments began with 32 mice, the other half with 56, of evenly male and female composition, and all having just reached maturity. Calhoun estimated that approximately 40 rats could comfortably be housed in these enclosures, but he would allow these populations to increase to 80 before he would cull them. Almost immediately after introduction, things began to go awry. The females, unsurprisingly, spread themselves out somewhat evenly through the pens, but after the males jockeyed for dominance and those of highest rank were determined, they began to distribute themselves strangely. Less dominant male rats will typically awaken earlier and begin to wander and forage for food, and due to the design of the pen, this meant that they usually would end up in the center sections to eat. During this time, the dominant males of the outer pens would wake up and begin guarding their respective territories. Since there was only one entrance ramp to either end, the dominant males of either pen would bar the return of the less dominant males, forcing the male population to clump in the center pens, while the
Is that not how is that not how real life works? Like think about back in school. Where did all the popular girls surround themselves? Like who what type of dude did the popular girls always hang around with? The jocks, the jerks, the hood dudes, you know what I'm saying? The so-called alpha males. And where did everybody else sit? Everybody else sat and stayed where they couldn't get bullied or in neutral zones, you know? Same thing. That blueprint encourages obesity, anxiety, dependency, and paranoia layout of the land. First come, first serve. Exactly. And we all kind of have adopted that mentality living in inner cities. That's the whole point that I'm trying to drive throughout this whole video. This whole lesson.
Dominant end males protected what came to be their harems. Only a few other deferential males were allowed to remain. These few remaining males began exhibiting odd behavior. Though they would spend most of their time in the burrows with the females, hiding away from the dominant male, they would never attempt to mate with any of them. Instead, perplexingly, they would try to mate with the dominant male, and even more perplexing, the dominant male would not fight these attempts.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? the non-dominant men ignored the women and tried to be sexual with the masculine dominant men, and the men let them. I'm not even gonna get into, you know what I'm saying, but how many uh how many cross-dressing buff dudes do you have to see out and about to know that, the point I'm trying to make, I'm trying to make with this video.
At the same time as this was happening, the effect of Calhoun's special feeders was taking hold. Since procuring food was such a lengthy process at the hard food feeders, it was common for one rat to join another while in the process of feeding. By this method, the rats slowly became conditioned to eating in the company of the rats, until, eventually, the rats would refuse to eat unless another rat was present. Since more rats tended to be in the center pens, this behavior meant that, over time, more and more rats made their way there, further condensing them. This heightened the proximity of an already cramped population. In the experiments with the powdered food, this effect was what he called a behavioral sink, or an increase in pathological activity in the rat.
The common source of these disturbances became most dramatically apparent in the populations of our first series of 3 experiments, in which we observed the development of what we called a behavioral sink. The animals will crowd together in greatest number in one of the 4 interconnecting pens in which the colony was maintained. As many as 60 of the 80 rats in each experimental population would assemble in one pen during periods of feeding. Individual rats would rarely eat except in the company of other rats. As a result, extreme population densities developed in a pen adopted for eating. How can we apply that? Because you can yeah, that's definitely emotional abuse. What real life thing can we equate that with, like people refusing to that's a hard one, because you ain't gotta tell nobody to go spend their food stamps, like or to like buy something. Like, you ain't really gotta. Oh, you know what? I can say this though. Maybe the way I can parallel that is kind of like the culture of nobody does something unless everybody says it's cool, and you're not confident in doing your own thing unless everybody else agrees with it. So whatever the follow the leader culture that we have, like, oh, this shoe ain't cool, so I can't wear it type junk. That's the best kind of parallel I can think of.
Rats, due to the stress involved in such high population density. For the females, the behavioral sink manifested in reduced capacity for nest building and young rearing. Infant rats are extremely dependent upon their mothers for nearly all things. However, under the effects of the behavioral sink, the mothers would often be interrupted in their nest building practices to engage in some other social activity. As time wore on, this led to sparser nests which could not house the young properly. If a mother decided to move her litter, she often would only move some of them or scatter them about the pen.
How many abandoned children? How many abandoned children do we know? How many neglectful parents? I'm not just blaming women, because the experiment is talking about women, but men are parents too. So I'll just say parents. How many parents are neglectful of their children, or play favorites, or treat one or a couple of them different than the other, or they would rather go to the club at night than watch their kids and make sure they're okay, like, or they want to party downstairs and then all the kids is upstairs not being watched, not being cared for, or they getting high on the couch and little Johnny doing backflips off the bed about to bust his head, like all that kind of stuff.
And in separate locations. What's more, when female rats are ready to mate, the males can sense it, and the enclosed space meant that a female could not escape the continuous advances of the males during these periods. Even when they would enter their nests for a reprieve, they would be followed in and harrowed. These factors together resulted in it.
And I'm not gonna say the word, but y'all hear, but y'all kind of know what he's saying. Just like all the weak niggas who be catcalling females and following them and harassing them, even though they not ready to, they not feeling you, but you still want to say little sexual jokes and, you know what I'm saying, try to feel on them and all that stuff. Like, yo, we really be like psychologically toyed with, for real. And all of this stuff, like, it's not a conspiracy when people be saying all of this stuff is done by design. Like, we have to remember, like, if you ever go on a plane and you actually look out the window, you will see that the world is cut out like a grid, like an electric grid. Like, if I know it sounds cliche, but if you actually take apart a computer and look at the motherboard of the computer, we are literally designed like that. It looks like we're living on a memory card or something. Like, that's literally how cities are designed. Like, all of this stuff is everything has a purpose, man. Everything. And so we not giving no weak nigga who can't understand what the word no means. We not giving them no passes at all, because you still weak. You still a punk. You still are unworthy of whatever woman that you harassing. But this is where that behavior comes from.
An extremely high infant mortality rate, in one case reaching 96%. For the males, this manifested in different ways. The dominant males would occasionally lash out in violence against the other members of the pen, including infants, often biting and wounding their tails. Among the lower class males were three groups. The first he described as the homosexuals, which he immediately corrects as pansexuals, who would not compete for status, but would often attempt to mate with any other rat, regardless of gender or age. Much like in the end pens, these advances went unchallenged. The second group he described as somnambulists, who moved slowly through the pen without interacting with other individuals in any fashion, and the other rats, in turn, ignored them, except in rare circumstances. These rats...
So we got pansexuals, and we have the loners and the ones that are overlooked. Now, I'm going to change the concept from the hood to a high school just for this section right here. And if you really just think about, even today, even more, how like all these social outcasts got all of these different types of titles and languages to kind of describe, you know what I'm saying, their uniqueness or whatever. This is that group that they talking about. And I ain't gotta explain the pansexual, homosexual thing, because this isn't like anti-homosexual propaganda. So
externally, he described as fat, sleek, and healthy looking. But to him, the strangest group was the third, which he named the probers. These rats were hyperactive, hypersexual, and pansexual. Despite violence from the dominant males, they would viciously pursue females in heat, eschewing any sort of courtship ritual and following them into their burrows to mate.
That's all you niggas who don't understand. Once again, that's all you niggas who don't understand what the word no means.
8. Later on in the experiments, they would often find the corpses of the improperly cared for young, which they would cannibalize. In time, one of Calhoun's assistants would publicly describe these pens as hell. At this point, Calhoun and his pathological changes would have eventually led to the deaths of the colonies. At their conclusion, he would take the 4 healthiest males and females and allow them to breed, but their behavior had been so inexorably altered that none of their pups survived beyond weaning.
Yo, I mean, I feel like I don't even have to play the rest of the video. I'm going to, but how often do you what the saying before I press play? What's the saying? You can take you can take somebody out the hood, but you cannot take the hood out of them, or however that saying goes. I don't, I don't want to cuss too much because I want as many people to be able to watch this as possible. But man, that's crazy. This gives so much perspective to a lot of things, to just how, life in the hood, the reasons for the way, how dangerous it was. It's all in the design of the environment.
This short article enraptured its US audience, and the effects on both the scientific world and popular culture were immediate. People began to relate Calhoun's rat experiments to modern city life, and in an era where fear of social deviance was reaching an extreme high, it was largely seen as a reflection of the current time and where society could be heading,
And even
egged on
now,
by Calhoun's provocative language and allegorical design of his test environment, made to look like a city. Population density quickly became a common topic. Psychologist Carl Rogers, in his work Some Social Issues Which Concern Me, stated that, quote, "The resemblance to human behavior is frightening. In humans, we see poor family relationships, the lack of caring, the complete alienation, the magnetic attraction of overcrowding, the lack of involvement which is so great that it permits people to watch a long, drawn-out murder without so much as calling the police. Perhaps all city dwellers are inhabitants of a behavioral sink." Unquote. Soon after.
And let me tell you this. Let me say this. The way that he's talking right now, you would think that he was in 2021. Everything that he just listed, even down to people will watch a whole murder, like on social media, you know what I'm saying? And not call the police. What's different? It's not this is what makes me so upset when people say that things have changed, or like it's the apocalypse, or the world about to end, and it's so terrible out here. It is the same exact life that we've been living for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. The only difference is that we just repeatedly get shown all the negative things that's going on, but it's literally the same life and the same issues. And these people have even said, like, yo, why is our cities designed in this way? Because look at the behaviors of the rats, look at the behaviors of people. It's the same thing. Like, this ain't nothing new. We just late to the party. This is not nothing new. All of everything from the you seen at the beginning of the video, they had the protesting for the environment, all that stuff. We see people like me talking about, yo, like, look at the design, look what y'all doing to the people. It ain't nothing new under the sun, man. This is just the same repeated simulation, and we all here to learn whatever lesson so we can vibrate to the source, vibrate high enough back to the source, man. But it's stuff like this that they don't teach in high school, or they might in higher education, like college and stuff, might teach stuff like this. But I ain't never seen in class talking about this kind of stuff. But man, let me stop rambling and let's keep watching.
Studies of dense urban environments were conducted to see if these effects translated directly to humans, but what they found was inconclusive and unsatisfying. Despite the suggestions of Calhoun's rats, humans in cities reacted differently, or sometimes opposite the manner that researchers expected, depending on the location. No matter how they tried, no evidence of a widespread behavioral sink could be found in urban areas. But this did not dissuade Calhoun. Even as others explored the problem of overcrowding, Calhoun frantically continued his research. Now a celebrated success and emboldened by the public acceptance of his ideas, he resumed his work at NIM on an even larger scale, though again away from the public eye. He spent his time on new subjects as he continued to perfect his enclosures and experiments until finally, after 11 years, Calhoun revealed his magnum opus through an article he entitled Death Squared, which was published in the journal Proceedings of the Royal Society of Medicine in January of 1973. The lengthy opening to this article was undeniably apocalyptic. Calhoun wrote, "I shall largely speak on healing, on life and its evolution. Threatening life and evolution are the two deaths, death of the spirit and death of the body. Evolution, in terms of ancient wisdom, is the acquisition of..."
Let me read this. I shall largely speak of mice, but my thoughts are on man, on healing, on life and its evolution. Threatening life and evolution are the two deaths, death of the spirit and death of the body. Evolution, in terms of ancient wisdom, is the acquisition of access to the tree of life. This takes us back to the white first horse of the apocalypse, which with its riders set out to conquer the forces that threaten the spirit with death. Further in Revelation, we note, to him who conquers, I will grant to eat the tree of life, which is in the paradise, of God.
Access to the tree of life, unquote. He goes on to heavily reference Revelations and of the riders of the apocalypse, using them to proclaim that the Hippocratic Oath applies not only to the body, but to the spirit. After this dramatic introduction, he described his test. For the most part, these new experiments were similar to his 1963 trials, including unlimited access to food and water, protection from the elements and predators, and safeguards against disease. Many parts, however, were drastically altered. As Calhoun mentions in his introduction, the Norway rats used in his first publicized experiments were replaced with albino house mice, which were taken from a breeding group from the National Institutes of Health made specifically to prevent communicable disease. To fit his new subjects, Calhoun had designed an entirely new enclosure. This version was much more vertical, with 16 wall-mounted housing areas for the rats at the tops of long metal tubes, which Calhoun called walk-up apartments. At the bottom of each apartment was a virtually unlimited supply of food, water, and nesting material. With the space
Shout out Sunridge. Shout out to Regencies again. Walk up apartments. Verbiage, y'all.
Space provided, Calhoun estimated that it could potentially hold 3,840 mice. He named this enclosure Universe 25. Calhoun's methods also had changed. Rather than instituting population control, he would interfere far less. His plan was to place 8 mice in the enclosure, 4 male and 4 female, and simply watch and wait. Calhoun observed 4 distinct phases in the ensuing experiment. Phase A was predictable, constituting the time period before the first new mice were born, which ended up being 104 days. For the mice, these days were, quote, marked by considerable social turmoil. After the social order was established and the first brood was born, the population began Phase B, which Calhoun named the exploitation phase. During this time, the mice doubled in number every 55 days as new young grew to maturity and had their own young. This doubling continued until day 315, after which the doubling rate slowed to a rate of 145 days, nearly 3 times as long. By this point, the different broods had clumped into one side of the pen, exhibiting the same sort of clumping as the Norway rats, but this time without any coaxing from Calhoun's designs. This change in the rate of procreation marked Phase C, which Calhoun labeled as the stagnation phase. This is when the most notable events occurred, and they eerily mirrored Calhoun's rat experiments. In a natural setting, those mice which find...
I want to say this. As we get into the next phase of this video, think about redlining. Think about white flight. Think about, the different types of resources that are in the inner city versus the suburbs. Just think about that.
No social niche will leave the colony, but in this experiment, emigration was impossible, and so those forced to remain withdrew from society. These dejected males formed a large pool in the center of the enclosure. They quickly became characterized by both their inactivity and their many scars and wounds. Occasionally, they would grow agitated and attack one another, and with nowhere to retreat, the recipient of these attacks would simply lay still and endure the assault. The outcast females, rather than joining them, would retreat to the highest apartments and live quietly among one another. It was during this time that the behavioral sink manifested, with mice gathering around specific food hoppers in large numbers, while others remained almost entirely untouched, showing how, again, the need for social interaction had become so intertwined with the need for food that the former had overtaken the latter. The males who had won the initial fights
I mean, I hate to say it, but that's a good point. The white mice had a different dwelling beforehand. Yeah, think about like somebody going into let's just be well. Y'all know the video how movies be playing the trope of a suburban dude or a lame going into the hood. Like I'm not gonna play around. But yeah. Think about this. They said that the rejected women all went up to the highest point and chilled amongst each other. That is no different than a bunch of single women who is just chill with each other and drink and talk all the time and don't date nobody, don't be, all in the mix. They just be chilling by themselves. No different. They said that social interactions and food went hand in hand. How many, especially black families, sometimes the only time we come together is to eat, is to have a family reunion and be social in one spot. Or when we hang with friends, what are we usually doing? If we're not drinking, then we're eating. And so socialization and food go hand in hand. And where did we get that from? Where did we get that from? We kind of finding it out now.
also were placed under extreme stress. As more and more mice reached maturity from within and without, the leaders of the social groups continually had to patrol and defend their territory. Eventually, they reached the point of exhaustion and could not defend the females within their group. These females were therefore forced to defend the nest themselves, even when nursing their young, leading to generalized aggressive behavior. This aggression would
How often do our women complain that they feel unprotected and that they have to be masculine in order to protect themselves, or they have to be rah-rah to protect themselves because they feel unprotected? How often do they say that? All the time. And men tend to get offended. Even I've gotten offended a few times when I've seen women talk about that, because I'm like, nah, I protect my girl or my mama and my sister and blah blah blah. But I have to realize, and other people like me have to realize, that we are far few in between, just like these mice in the experiment. So of course a woman, if she always got to fend for herself and her child, and all her resources come from her own grind, and niggas be trying to grab on her and stuff, and men are so effeminate that they don't do nothing, or they like, nah, let's just walk away. Of course they gonna have to protect themselves or learn survival skills like that.
but inevitably be misdirected onto their young, who would be wounded by their mothers and forced to leave the nest before they were finished weaning.
How many I'm sorry, but how many mothers be overly beating their kids, man? How many mothers take out their aggression about what they got going on in their life out on their kids? How many 14, 15-year-old girls get kicked out of their house? How, like, Come on, man. The proof is in the pudding, man. The proof is in the pudding.
Like the rats, the mother mice would also forget some of their young when moving from one nesting site to another. Due to the added stress of defending their territory, sometimes the mothers would reabsorb unborn mice in the womb, further reducing the fertility rates. Calhoun writes, "For all practical purposes, there had been a death of societal organization by the end of Phase C. Finally, there was Phase D, which Calhoun entitled the Death Phase. This phase was characterized largely by an entire generation of young who had been rejected by their mothers early and forced to leave the nest, and they were therefore unable to exhibit normal social behavior. This manifested in numerous ways. The females of this generation had far fewer children, and those that did have children lacked the maternal instincts necessary to raise them beyond weaning." Calhoun,
is that not what goes on today? Is that not what goes on today? How often do you hear women say, I don't want kids? How often do you see them struggling after the initial, like when the baby starts growing and it needs emotional, you know what I'm saying, emotional love, and they just don't know how to, you know what I'm saying? Like people be saying like, oh, some people just don't have mother instincts. Man, it's a reason for that. Like that is not natural. That is not natural at all. That's not natural, man.
Calhoun goes on to describe the males of this generation. Quote, "Male counterparts to these non-reproducing females were soon dubbed the beautiful ones."
Male counterparts to these non-reproducing females we soon dubbed the beautiful ones. They never engaged in sexual approaches toward females, and they never engaged in fighting, and so they had no wound or scar tissue. Thus, their pelage remained in excellent condition. Their behavioral repertoire became largely confined to eating, drinking, sleeping, and grooming, none of which carried any social implications beyond that represented by contiguity of bodies. How many dudes do y'all see on TikTok trying to look beautiful? Always dressed nice, non-aggressive, but don't really talk to girls like that. You know what I'm saying? Like don't got like no type of oomph to them, but they chilling. And they not, you know what I'm saying? They not overly sexual. They don't like fighting. They just, I want to look good. I want to eat good. I want to drink good, party, sleep. Boom. That's their whole life. Man, that is crazy.
They never engaged in sexual approaches toward females, and they never engaged.
In all honesty, that is literally, I think it's Gen Z, because we're millennials. Like if you knocking on 30 right now, you're a millennial. So this is basically Gen Z right now.
Engaged in fighting, and so they had no wound or scar tissue. Thus, their pelage remained in excellent condition. Their behavioral repertoire became largely confined to eating, drinking, sleeping, and grooming, none of which carried any social implications beyond that represented by contiguity of bodies." Unquote. As the last mice with reproductive instincts aged beyond their fertility, Calhoun declared that the last male would die around day 1,780 of the experiment, effectively rendering the colony dead, as it would be unable to produce any more young. His present tense language implied that, when the article was published, the colony was still technically alive, though its final fate was practically sealed. Calhoun closed his article with a call to action. For an animal so complex as man, there is no logical reason why a comparable sequence of events should not also lead to species extinction. If opportunities for role fulfillment fall far short of the demand by those capable of filling roles and having expectancies to do so, only violence and disruption of social organization can follow. Individuals born under these circumstances will be so out of touch with reality as to be incapable even of alienation. Their most complex behaviors will become fragmented.
How many people have social anxiety? How many people don't have what we call bandwidth to deal with things? How many people have psychological issues, are on antidepressants, and have body dysmorphia and low self-esteem and depression and anger, or hypersexualized? That is by like that is what he's talking about. Like, that is by design.
Acquisition, creation, and utilization of ideas appropriate for life in a post-industrial, cultural, conceptual, technological society will have been blocked. Just as biological generativity in the mouse involves this species' most complex behaviors, so does ideational generativity for man. Loss of these respective complex behaviors means death of the species. But even as Calhoun was performing his research on mice, others had been at work applying his theories to humans. By this point, researchers had moved to more specific locations of overcrowding rather than the generalized location of cities, testing the effects on students in dormitories and patients at hospitals. But the most fruitful example they discovered was in prisons. Paul Paulus from the University of Texas wrote that prisons were the perfect place for this sort of study, describing the social interaction between inmates as intense, prolonged, inescapable, and realistic. The prison in the study also offered the closest analog to Calhoun's rat experiments, since the prisoners could not escape the company of others, even in their communal cells. There, they found connection between over-socialization and suicide, violence, psychopathy, and stress. After such studies, environmental psychologists began to discover the problem. They identified two different kinds of density: physical density and social density. Physical density was the amount of space per person, while social density was the number of individuals occupying space. They found that social density was the much more important factor, as individuals in high social density were unable to control their interactions with others. Based on this research,
we can kind of see that in the most simplistic form when it's overcrowded classrooms. I was going to Northern, I think this is back in 2010, and I believe the school was Northwestern, I think. Northwestern or Southwestern. Their students came to our school, and so it was like just a massive awkwardness and aggression, and people were stepping on each other's toes, figuratively and literally. Like, it was madness. Like, nobody really learned nothing. It was so many different personalities, and one person can't control 50 students in one classroom. Like, it was chaotic.
research, human environments could be designed to at least partially mitigate these issues, allowing those living within them the privacy they needed to maintain healthy social interaction. Outside of scientific discourse, Calhoun's rhetoric has maintained its strength through the years, with different groups of all political persuasions bending his results to support their views on social degradation, however they may define it. Among more scholarly sources, Calhoun has been both lauded and criticized for his work. Those who support him cite his forward thinking about overpopulation, while those who deride him cite his misrepresentation of the actual social problems within cities, guiding discourse away from the true causes of societal discord. But no matter what those in the modern day think of his research, his influence on the way America views its cities is undeniable.
Very, very intriguing video. I would say it's less about the population density and more of the purpose of living. Because back in the day, you kind of had to grow your own crops or hunt your own food, gather your own water, build your own houses. But for the most part, our life is automated or semi-automated. Like, we don't have to learn how to actually plant anything. We just go to the grocery store or, to buy the meats or whatever and the vegetables. Excuse me. We don't even have to understand how electricity works. All we got to do is make sure that we pay the bills, and we don't build. Most average people don't build houses because, they're in like an apartment or a townhouse or something. So I think it's the lack of purpose. We have a lot of think about how long 24 hours really is, because there's already 60 seconds that makes up a minute. So imagine however many 60 seconds it takes until you get to 24 hours. And since everything is damn near handed to us, we don't really have anything to fill that time, which is why it's easy for us to binge watch Netflix, or that's easy for us to go find trouble out in the world, because we literally don't have a purpose. We have nothing to do. And I'm not saying that everybody doesn't have something to do, because I'm not a planter, but I do research. I'm like a nutritional coach. And so I'm learning all about, I'm actually furthering my knowledge on nutrition and how to help people and blah, blah, blah. So I have a purpose, but everybody isn't purpose driven. Some people literally wake up and have nothing to do but eat, drink, shit, and go back to sleep. Like, literally, some people live that life. So they find things to fill that empty void because they're not living their purpose. And if you don't have to be ambitious, then what's the drive to live? Like, I guarantee if I had to plant all of my food, and especially when I was a meat eater, if I had to hunt for food, I wouldn't have been 400 pounds. I for sure would not have gotten to 400 pounds. There would be no way. Facts. And success depends a lot on two things: knowledge and your social circle. So you definitely got good traits. But yeah, if I had to hunt and plant and all that stuff back when I was eating meat, I would not have gotten to 400 pounds, because I would have had to be physically active to even catch the cow or rabbit or whatever I wanted to eat, or I would have had to fish for hours upon hours to catch something, so it wouldn't have been even, you couldn't, like, if we depended on ourselves, fast food restaurants and stuff would not survive, because we wouldn't even have the concept of somebody else is going to cook something that we didn't catch. All else is just a means of keeping preoccupied in other people's ideas. That's facts. We live literally in other people's reality. Like, there is not a McDonald's tree. It does not rain starburst. You can't dig cinnamon toast crunch out the ground by the roots. You feel me? Like, it doesn't rain Kool-Aid. So, like, I don't know what else to say, because that's just basically it. Like, all of this is designed to our detriment. It's to literally make us subservient and selfish and lazy and docile, Whew. So I done talked a whole lot. I ain't really got nothing else to say. If anybody wants to come up here is your time to do that. Once again, y'all see my website scrolling. That's knowledgebynature.square.site. Make sure you go ahead and just check it out for the one time. You will see some educational videos. I post almost every day wisdom of the day, wisdoms of the day, you know, and I'm actually offering 3 services right now. Good night. I'm offering 3 services. That's the victory consultation, just for me meal plan, and the healthy by choice nutritional mentorship program. If you know anybody who has weight issues or wants to gain weight, or is depressed and they want to know like what kind of foods can they eat to make them feel better, or they want more energy throughout the day, or they just want some general nutritional advice, go ahead and take them to Knowledge by Nature site. And once again, before I end, The Junk and Junk Food, a comprehensive look at corner store chemistry, on Amazon right now for $19.99. And you can also purchase on Amazon my very first book that I put out, Fat Club, 4 Pillars of Self-Improvement, right here. So thank y'all for watching. For those who watched tonight, and for those who's going to watch later, I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I hope that y'all take some type of wisdom from this. And please like, share, and subscribe, and spread this as far as it can go, because this perspective and this information was just mind-blowing. And when I found out about it, and I honestly found out about it this morning, I'm like, okay, Spirit said you need to talk about this tonight. So that's why I did it. And I hope y'all enjoyed this. So I'm about to get on up out of here. You know what I'm saying? And y'all have a wonderful. I'm so conceited. I got issues. But all right, y'all. Peace.